In business today, three things to know. First, are we heading to big trouble in Little China? Protesters in Hong Kong say they will occupy government buildings, and the upheaval now threatens to unravel the island's economy. Then, Wall Street rattled. A touch of Ebola, a Hong Kong uprising, and weak economic news sends investors running to the exits. And taking flight. One man's mission to train more minority pilots. Arise Xchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Chinese authorities appear to be taking a wait-and-see attitude as the latest protests in Hong Kong draw the biggest crowds yet. Reuters is reporting that there are no plans to remove the tens of thousands of people filling the streets and that the government plans to let them stay for weeks if need be. The protesters are demanding Beijing loosen its iron grip over the government and that its hand-picked chief executive of Hong Kong resign from the post. And if he does not, they are threatening to occupy government buildings starting tomorrow. The mostly young protesters want a broader choice of candidates in 2017 elections. Now, all of this, by the way, is happening on a holiday meant to celebrate the anniversary of China's Communist Republic. Arise News contributor Eric Ham is in D.C. to bring us up to date. And Eric, a slight change in tone from the Chinese government today. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. You look at all of these protesters during the Chinese National Day, no doubt, in one of China's major financial hubs. And it just seems that they're getting bigger and bigger, and these protesters are becoming more emboldened. And it seems like China's leadership is actually taking a step back. But the question is, how long are they going to allow this to continue to take place? We've already seen it wreak havoc on markets across the globe, especially in China. The question is, how long can they allow this to take place?
Yeah, and I'm wondering if there's some dissent within the government itself, because yesterday, Hong Kong's chief executive, handpicked by Beijing, of course, said that this protest was illegal and that China would not negotiate. And today, at least the sources that the news media is reporting is saying that they may simply let this go on. And I'm wondering if they're sort of reading the tea leaves on the economic issues a little bit.
Well, that's an interesting point. But also, too, we have to keep in mind, now you've got the entire world watching this. And so China, which has been very engaged in actually monitoring what comes in and what goes out, now it's almost as if they can't really contain, all of the coverage that they're getting. And because Hong Kong is a major tourist destination for many on the mainland, you have people who are traveling to Hong Kong and witnessing this and witnessing these types of protests for the very first time. And so President Xi really has to be concerned about, will something like this spread, to the mainland? They have to be more vigilant about that now.
I didn't think about that. That's a really interesting point, that it's so close to China and with so many Chinese tourists, especially this time of the year, by the way, going to Hong Kong, they're seeing something they may not be used to. We're 20 plus years away from Tiananmen Square, but clearly the young people in Hong Kong know of that event, and I'm wondering how that's factoring into their thinking here.
Not only how is it factoring into their thinking, but also it's very clear that it's weighing very heavily on the minds of Chinese leaders, because the last thing they want is another Tiananmen Square, where it almost seems as though the protesters are actually courting another Tiananmen Square. So I think there's a battle of wills going on here. And if you just look at the protesters, you even see many of them are taking pages out of the Ferguson protesting that took place here in Ferguson, Missouri, with the hands up, don't shoot. And so I think it's becoming, more and more emboldened. And also keep in mind, it's the financial district in Hong Kong that is ground zero for these protests.
And that's a really interesting point, because it's a whole different type of pressure. It's not just political now, it's economic. And I'm having a feeling the Chinese leadership may not be so used to that. Eric Ham in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much.
Good to be here. Thank you.
The international businesses are actually starting to feel the pinch from protesters, especially as mainland Chinese tourists that Eric just referred to are canceling trips to the island. Tara Joseph reports.
This is one of the busiest and most expensive streets in the world. But Causeway Bay in Hong Kong is now dominated by pro-democracy supporters on what is supposed to be one of the biggest shopping weeks of the year, Golden Week holidays in mainland China. High-end stores such as gold retailer Chow Tai Fook shutters down. International jeweler Tiffany's in Central leaving a sign to customers, "Come back another time." Hong Kong has been known as the shopping hub of Asia, with almost every international retailer imaginable opening big stores in high-rent districts to cater to Chinese mainland tourists and the city's own wealthy customers. But over the last months, retail sales have fallen dramatically, especially of jewelry and watches, where sales volumes are down almost 15% so far this year. First, China's Communist Party cracked down on conspicuous consumption. Now, pro-democracy protesters transforming the city streets into a major civil disobedience movement that values people power over consumers.
We think democracy is more important for our future rather than business, yes.
The swelling crowds in Hong Kong have brought large sections of the Asian financial hub to a standstill. Several banks are weighing at contingency plans of moving parts of their trading desks away from the central business district for safety. For now, international businesses are holding tight in a city decorated by barricades and people. But if Hong Kong's umbrella revolution continues, the city's status may be jolted.
Tara Joseph in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Minority Authority, the city's de facto central bank, said it has activated its contingency plan already and is ready to inject liquidity into the banking system if needed. The fourth quarter started on a rather lousy note on Wall Street, a triple-digit loss for the Dow, driven a little bit by Hong Kong, a touch of Ebola, and some bad economic data. Let's take a look at the final numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 238 points to 16,804. The S&P 500 back 26 to 1946. And the NASDAQ down 71 points to 4422. Some of the top stocks we're watching today, by the way, are pharmaceuticals. As Ebola fears, that's good for them. Shares of the Canadian biotech company Techmira surged by more than 20% after a case of the deadly virus was first reported in the U.S. Techmira closing at $24.99. Sarepta Therapeutics, another company behind another promising Ebola drug, says it has enough doses to treat approximately 100 patients. Going to need a little more than that in Africa. Shares, however, rose by more than 7% to more than $22. And not related to Ebola, Yahoo said in a filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission that its net proceeds from the Alibaba initial public offering came to $9.4 billion. Yahoo owns a 15% stake in the company, probably the best investment the company has ever made. Yahoo closing at $40.32. Taking a look at commodities, gold up and oil back down 40 cents to $90.77 a barrel. More signs that the U.S. labor market has some stabilizing effects. ADP says private payrolls met expectations, with companies creating 213,000 new jobs in September. Small businesses with less than 50 employees led the way. However, the Institute for Supply Management's National Factory Activity Index eased to 56.6 in September. That's down from 59 in August. A reading above 50, however, indicates expansion in the manufacturing sector. Construction spending, however, was also down. Well, stocks take a dive on this first day of trading in the fourth quarter. A whole bunch of concerns are factoring into all of this. Zane Brown, fixed income strategist and a partner at Lord Abbett, is back here on Arise Exchange. Zane, sort of a perfect storm of activity today, right? We have protests in Hong Kong. We have a disease gone wild out there, and we have some questionable economic news. Is that basically what happened?
Yep, and it was a pretty ugly response on the part of the market. You know, down over 200 points is really not very good news, and this is the third day in a row we've had negative performance. We get a fourth day. That will be the first time in 2014 where we had 4 consecutive days. As you point out, you know, there were a number of different factors. Weakness in manufacturing here, weakness in manufacturing in Europe, weakness in manufacturing in China. Add to that weakness in construction in the United States, and it just wasn't enough to overcome the somewhat good news that we had on the employment side.
And so I'm also wondering if the investors are sort of looking for an excuse and worried that others are going to, of course, look for an excuse, because the market had this huge run up in early September, and now maybe it's time them to just take money off the table?
Well, there may be some of that because certainly the focus was on the negative news when they could have focused on good news. And certainly there were good aspects of Ebola from a market standpoint in terms of some pharmaceutical companies. But then, of course, overwhelming that was the behavioral effects of people fearful that, gee, I might not want to travel. I might not want to get on a plane. And we saw online travel companies fall in price. We saw airlines, beginning yesterday, fall precipitously in price. And so, all of it suggests a focus on negative news.
And of course, you never know which way the psyche is going to go. Do people wake up on Thursday morning and say, oh my God, I got to get out of the market? Or do people wake up and say this is a buying opportunity?
Right.
We never really know which way that's going to go. Let's talk about jobs for a moment, because this is something that's going to affect potentially interest rates, right? If the job market continues to increase and we started to see a little bit wage pressure, do you think there's any changes from the Fed policy coming?
Well, Fed policy is really scheduled to be very aggressive. I mean, when you look at their expectations, they expect to be at 1.25 to 1.5 Fed funds at the end of next year. Nobody's prepared for the Fed to hike interest rates 5 or 6 times, 25 basis points
because
a time.
They don't do 1.5 all at once.
No, that's right. They're not going to do that. And everybody's expecting, it'll be slow beginning in the middle of next year. Well, they're going to have to start in April if they're going to get to 1.25 and 1.5. That will surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, and do you think they're going to stay on that schedule? Because Janet Yellen is sort of cutting herself a lot of slack here.
I don't think the U.S. economy can afford the aggressive schedule that the Fed is suggesting. And I think activity like today really supports that view, that the economy is not strong enough to support an aggressive Fed tightening.
What is the bond market saying? What is it predicting here?
Well, when you look at Fed funds futures, it's not 1.25 to 1.5 at the end of 2015. It's only 75 basis points. I think that's a little bit more realistic.
Okay, Zane Brown, a lot to talk about today. Thank you so much for putting it into perspective.
Thank you.
Zane Brown from Lord Abbott, appreciate it. Coming up, worries that children may have been infected by the Ebola patient in Dallas. You're watching Arise Exchange. Last week on Arise Exchange, climate change made its way to the top of the agenda at the United Nations General Assembly, even as the world debates how to handle ISIS, Ukraine, and Ebola.
We're going to have some business leaders, we're going to have some global leaders. They're going to say, these are the actions we're going to take.
The marijuana business owner / TV reporter quit on the air so she can go full-time into her pot business.
I quit.
Spreading the message of freedom, and I'm going to start with marijuana. Watch this week for more Arise Exchange. Welcome back to Arise Exchange. There is now concern that school-aged children in Texas may have been exposed to Ebola. Health officials are monitoring up to 18 people, including children, who had contact with the first patient diagnosed with the deadly virus in the United States. That patient has now been identified as Thomas Eric Duncan. He came from Liberia, visiting family here in the U.S. Joining us now by phone to talk more about the impact of Ebola is Aubrey Hruby. She is visiting fellow at the Africa Center at the Atlantic Council. Aubrey, welcome back to Arise Exchange.
Thank you again, Andrew.
You are somebody who travels back and forth, so I want to start with the impact sort of on the airlines and your concern, frankly, for yourself and for your colleagues about how to kind of address this situation.
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Andrew, because in my travels, I've been continually surprised by how big and growing this fear is of Ebola. I personally am not afraid because I believe that it's not airborne. It's safe to travel to Africa. If you're going to South Africa, it's further away from Liberia than Europe is. People often fail to keep relative risk in the picture when they look at something as scary as Ebola. So, many flights have been canceled. Traveling within West Africa is a nightmare. But overall, the view that Ebola is a threat to all of Africa is not a realistic one.
Yeah, and we have to remember that diseases like malaria in Africa will kill more people. The flu will kill more people here in the United States. What is the cost of this as, this sort of increases that you're seeing in West Africa as far as the financial cost?
So the World Bank has put the current cost in the worst case scenario around $1 billion. That constitutes, the cost directly to the economies of Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, and the loss of growth. Also, the efforts to contain the disease. But in comparison to the SARS epidemic of 2003, which was priced at $40 billion, it seems small right now. My worry is that the fear factor will linger far longer than the actual disease, and we'll see greater costs. In fact, the World Bank president said that 80 and 90% of the costs of something like Ebola is just a result of fear.
And that relates specifically, of course, to tourism. Many of these countries rely on tourism dollars significantly.
Yes, in Africa that's true, but Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea don't have robust tourism industries. So you're seeing those economies hit mainly by the loss to the iron ore industry, to the rubber industry, and to general business being hampered by the fact flights are not flying in and out, and that all the government can do is try to stop the spread of this horrible disease.
And of course, many of these countries talking about shutting down and have shut down. That's an impact.
For all intents and purposes, that is true. I think you're going to see the biggest economic impact in the cash crops of West Africa in general.
Okay.
You're seeing cocoa exporters worried about high cocoa prices, the highest in 3 years, palm oil, rubber. Major cash crops out of West Africa will be hit mainly by the impact on travel and the loss of flights between countries.
We'll certainly raise the prices. Aubrey, Hruby, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Time now for our business ticker stories making headlines across the nation and the world. Late this afternoon, the head of the U.S. Secret Service resigned. Some say that was pretty quick. Julia Pearson is stepping down following a series of rather embarrassing and potentially dangerous incidents involving her agents. Pearson testified in front of Congress on Tuesday, where she faced blistering questions as to how a man jumped the White House fence, ran across the lawn, and eventually made it inside the east wing of the mansion. The agency has also been trying to answer how a convicted felon armed with a gun managed to be next to the president in an elevator. No word yet on a replacement. Wondering who's exactly lining up to take that job. U.S. auto sales overall came in strong for the month of September. General Motors, Chrysler, and Nissan, fueled by demand for pickups, lower gas prices, folks, set the pace among the major automakers. Each posted gains of 19%. Honda followed with a 12% gain, while Toyota saw sales rise only slightly. Ford sales were actually down nearly 3%. California has become the first state to ban plastic bags. The new law, which goes into effect next July, prohibits stores from putting shoppers' goods into single-use plastic bags. I guess now you just have to stuff all the goods in your pocket. The ban is a milestone for environmentalists. Plastic manufacturers have already vowed to take their opposition to the ballot box. Turning now to Regulation Nation. Across the country in California, volunteering, especially for a charitable cause, is typically a good thing, except if it's in one winery in California. Westover Winery in Castro Valley, California, was fined $115,000 after using volunteers to help make its wine. And now it could be shut down. That's because state law prohibits for-profit businesses using volunteers. Well, Bill Smyth is the owner of Westover Winery, and he joins us now by phone. Bill, what exactly happened here that you got a $115,000 fine because you've been using volunteers who I understand are basically learning how to make wine that will benefit them later?
That's correct. Let me just qualify one thing. Our business is only open 10 hours a week. We're a very, very, very small winery. And it's a small winery that even my wife and I could do all by ourselves. We don't need any volunteers. We don't need any workers. We don't need anybody else. So with that being said, we had people that would come to the winery and say, can I learn about wine? We said, sure, you could learn about wine. We'll teach you. We'll teach you how about wine. We'll teach you how to pour wine. We'll teach you how to make wine. And they were actually part of a formal vocational course, most of these people.
Yeah, it sounds like this was an educational program. So exactly why did the state come down on top of you, and how did the state find out about it?
Well, like many businesses all over the country, but especially in California, all you need is one disgruntled person who has wants revenge against you. And in our case, that's what happened, and it's happening to other businesses.
Don't you think the state recognizes, I guess they don't recognize, that it's these individuals who are paying the price for it, right? You weren't going to hire them to begin with. You say you didn't need the workers. They were there to learn something.
That's correct.
And have you received any feedback? I know you have a petition with local lawmakers to change the law. Have you received any feedback that might start creating some exemptions?
Yes, we're actually working with Assemblyman Quirk. We're working with Assemblyman Wachowski, who is actually in Sacramento today discussing this with the head of industrial relations. We're also working with the CEI in Washington, D.C. for their legal help. We're working with wineries and wine associations throughout California. But this is not just a winery thing. This is a small business issue.
Yeah, and it's
every single small business.
It's important to note this is not Microsoft here using interns, which was a relatively famous case. This is a small business issue.
Open 10 hours a week, only 2 days a week,
and
gross sales of $200,000, net profits of $11,000 a year.
Finally, Bill, real quick, can you stay in business?
I'm not sure if I want to stay in business in California. They've made the environment so bad for small business that I'm not sure that I'm going to continue. And I think we're trying to close by the end of the year.
Bill Smyth, owner of Westover Winery, we wish you the best of luck. Please stay in touch.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, a woman who is for gun rights, but not so much for civil rights, is our favorite person of the day. You're watching Arise Exchange.
If I was building my own network, it would be for the people, by the people. It would be very diverse. It would be with every culture you can think of.
If I was to start my own news network, it would reflect positive and negative within the continents and the countries around the world.
I think that I would be more looking towards young people.
If I were to build my own news network, it would look like New York City. Old, young, fresh, hip, classic.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
If I was to build my own news network, my own world network, I would love a correspondent in every country, every location, every city. I mean, it's kind of unrealistic, but how cool would it be to get local stories from the impoverished country, the impoverished city that we don't know about?
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, and not for the right reasons. Today, it is an owner of an Arkansas gun range who has declared the place, quote, a Muslim-free zone. It's good for business. Jan Morgan, who runs the Gun Cave shooting range in Hot Springs, noted on her website this past weekend that Muslims are now banned from her business. In fact, she actually wrote, quote, the range is now a Muslim-free zone. Morgan, whose business is to supply guns and live ammo to customers, says it's her job to keep everyone safe. And that would be poor judgment by her to allow Muslims at her gun range. Now, she says that she knows that not all Muslims are terrorists, but because she can't tell them apart, those are her words, she has decided to err on the side of caution. Morgan may think she knows something about Second Amendment gun rights, but she knows little about civil rights. Legal experts have weighed in to say her policy is unconstitutional and illegal. And so Jan Morgan is our favorite person of the day. Coming up, taking flight by putting low-income kids in the pilot seat. You're watching Arise Exchange. Informative, the U.S. economy is on the right path, and the wizard of the Fed is leading the way.
We started our companies originally to create something that made a positive difference.
Compelling.
I became very successful, not allowing myself to be average.
Our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention, and not for the right reason. Yeah, he sort of lost all business. Investors came back from the long weekend tanned, rested, and ready to buy stocks. Entertaining money daily, Arise Exchange. It started out as a way to discourage students from skipping school and to focus on education and setting goals. The Eagle Flight Pilot Training Squadron started as an after-school program in New Jersey, training students from 13 through 18 to become pilots. To date, more than 3,000 students have successfully completed the program. Michael Chisolm is the executive director of the Eagle Flight Training Squadron and joins us now to talk about what is a very cool initiative. I'm a pilot myself. You know, I am in the aviation industry. And one of the things that stands out in this business is how there's a complete lack of diversity among the pilot corps. You're helping to change that. How?
Yes. So as you said, Eagle Flight was started when Reverend White saw some kids skipping class, and he said, let me give these students something to do. Well, that something to do has turned into, like you said, over 3,000 students going through the program. And, you know, almost 40 students that are in the seats of commercial airlines to date.
That's an amazing stat, because low income is appealing to low income students. Those are who you're helping to a large extent.
Yeah.
And flight training has always been seen as very expensive. And also, quite honestly, people ask me why there are so few African Americans and frankly so few women pilots. And I say it's because you walk into your flight school and you only see white men around.
Yeah.
So this has become a much more welcoming environment. How do you get the kids involved though? Because it's a different than training them to be engineers or training them in technology, where a lot of kids want to go.
Right, and it's funny you say that and you bring up those fields as well, because what happens is a lot of the students come because they might have heard of the program from a friend, or you know, their parents quite frankly say, hey, you're going to go to this program and do something. What happens is, you know, the students come in and, you know, you get a 16-year-old in the airplane that solos, and he goes, you know, he or she goes, there's nothing that I can't do.
Yeah, and you can fly before you can drive in many states.
Exactly, and there's a lot of folks that actually do that. They solo on their 16th birthday. So what happens is, you know, the students come in, they get hooked, they get up in the air, and they say, you know, this is great. Some of them don't, but what happens is they've been exposed to various STEM fields in aviation and the aerospace industry.
STEM, science, technology,
engineering and math. And you know, through this tool of flight, you know, that's really started, you know, to put young people in the cockpit, we found that, you know, now if you look at it more broadly, we're putting people into, you know, various aviation companies, various engineering companies.
And for kids too, to go tell their friends they're doing something that few kids can do is really impressive. However, how is the program funded and the challenges you face?
Well, you know, the program is funded, you know, purely through the generosity of some donors. You know, we have people who constantly give, and we look to get grants every year. We apply for grants, you know, both local and federal grants, and that's really how the program is funded. Also, you know, we keep the other side of the accounting equation low, and there's only one person that's paid in the program. You know, we pay our flight instructor, and he is kind enough to do it at a rate that's much lower than he would normally get out in a private market.
How have you seen the kids change over the years? About 30, 40 years now?
Yeah, you know, you see them change tremendously, and it's great because they're put in leadership roles. You know, if you see on a Thursday night when we meet, you don't see me out there with the students. You know, they're running the program, so you see them grow.
The kids actually are not just learning, but they then go on to help run the program.
Exactly. So students that are in the program, we have student leaders that are elected by their peers. And the students, you know, they're running this program on Thursday night, me aside. So you see them grow leadership-wise. You also see confidence, because like I said, you get a kid in a plane, and he goes, you know, I soloed this weekend. What did you do?
That's right. And you flew a plane by yourself.
By myself. Yeah, exactly.
You know, we have about a minute left. Can you talk about the future plans, and have you tried to export this program to other parts of the country?
You know, that's one of our big things to do, is to try and expand within the program itself and regionally. When you look at within the program itself, like I said, we're seeing a lot of our kids go into different engineering fields and things like that. So next summer, we're looking to start ACE Camp. That is going to be focused on as Aviation Career Education Camp. Okay. And that camp will be focused on not only flight, but also the different engineering and technology fields. You look at DHL and Amazon building drones and testing.
Well, there's a whole new avenue of possible areas out there.
Exactly. So, you know, instead of, you know, if jobs are being taken by robots, we're going to start teaching the kids how to build robots.
How to build and fly robots. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, I know that major airlines and major aviation companies have certainly noticed Terrific. Thank
Absolutely.
you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Tomorrow on the Rise Exchange, USA Track and Field CEO and renowned entrepreneur Max Siegel on his company's plans to boost fitness and healthy living for children. Let's take a quick look at the markets today. Not a pretty picture. Red arrows across the board. I'm Andrew Schmertz. Thanks for watching the Rise Exchange. See you tomorrow. Stay right there.